I haven't slept in 3 days. Every shadow in my apartment feels like it's stretching, reaching, trying to grab me. It started subtle, a cold spot in the room, a whisper I couldn't quite catch. Then the phone calls began, silent at first, just static. Then a low, guttural moan that made my blood run cold. It's not for me, though, not directly. It's for Mark, my friend, or what's left of him. He thought it was just a game, a silly online RPG with some creepy lore. He laughed it off, said the graphics were terrible but the story was addictive. Now the laughter is gone, replaced by a terror so profound I can feel it echoing through our shared connection, a fear that seeped into my own bones. I saw him yesterday. His eyes, they were empty, but something else was looking out of them, something ancient and hungry. And it's getting closer. It's getting closer. That phrase echoes in my head like a death knell. I haven't seen Mark since that terrifying encounter, but I can feel it. The air in my apartment is thick, heavy, like static before a storm. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old pipes makes me jump. My own shadow seems to stretch and distort in the corner of my vision, shifting just beyond my direct gaze. I keep the lights on, all of them, but even then, the darkness feels deeper, more substantial. I remember when Mark first told me about Crimson Veil. He was practically vibrating with excitement. "Dude, you gotta see this," he'd said, his eyes bright, not yet hollow. "It's this old, obscure RPG. Graphics are like something from the early 2000s, but the story, the lore is insane." He laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. Sounds cheesy, right? But it's got this vibe, this oppressive atmosphere. You feel like you're doing something you shouldn't be. He started playing it constantly. At first, it was just a new obsession. He'd tell me about the cryptic puzzles, the unsettling character designs, the strange, echoing music. He'd stay up all night, eyes glued to the screen, a faint, almost manic smile on his face. I'd joke about him needing a life, needing sleep, but he'd just wave me off, saying, "Just one more quest, man. I'm almost there. I can feel it." The laughter faded first, then the light in his eyes. He stopped answering my calls for anything unrelated to the game. When I did manage to drag him away from his PC, he was gaunt, his skin pale, his hands trembling slightly. He'd talk about the game in hushed, reverent tones, no longer dismissing it as just cheesy. He described interactions with NPCs that felt too real, too personal. He started referring to the entity not as a game character, but as something else, something listening, something waiting. "It knows my name, dude," he'd whispered one night, his voice raspy, his eyes darting around his own apartment. "It knows things about me, things I've never told anyone." I tried to reason with him, to tell him it was just a sophisticated AI, a clever trick by the developers. But he just shook his head slowly, a terrifying certainty in his gaze. "No," he'd said, "it's not AI. It's awake." That's when the whispers started for me too. Faint, like wind through a broken window, but I knew it wasn't the wind. It was a low, sibilant sound, just beyond the range of understanding, always at the edge of my hearing. And the cold spots weren't just in my apartment anymore. I felt them outside, walking down the street, a sudden, unnatural chill that made the hairs on my arms stand on end, even on a warm day. It's like a predator's breath on the back of my neck. I tried to tell him to stop playing, to uninstall it, to burn his computer. But he just looked at me with those empty eyes, the ones I saw yesterday, and said, "I can't. It won't let me." And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he wasn't talking about the game's programming. He was talking about the thing that had replaced his laughter with terror. the thing that was now undeniably reaching for me. It's here. I can feel its breath. The air around me went frigid, a sudden, unnatural drop in temperature that made my teeth ache. It wasn't just cold, it was a vacuum of warmth, a presence that sucked the heat from everything. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing. Just the empty space of my living room, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of every lamp I owned. But I saw it, just for a fraction of a second, in the periphery of my vision. A distortion in the air, like heat haze rising from asphalt, but cold. A shimmer, a ripple, a negative space where light should have been. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just whispers and cold spots anymore. This was tactile. It was here, in my apartment, with me. I backed myself into a corner, clutching the phone in my trembling hand, the one I'd used to try and call Mark a dozen times today. No answer, just the endless hollow ring, or sometimes a click, followed by that same low, guttural moan I'd heard before. It wasn't a human sound. It was deeper, older, like something tearing itself free from stone. Sleep is a luxury I can't afford. Every time my eyes close, I see Mark's face, not as it was, but as it is now. Gaunt, pale, those horrifying empty eyes, and then the darkness behind them coalesces, forms into something indistinct, something with too many limbs, too many teeth. I jump awake, drenched in sweat, convinced I can hear the scratching at the walls again, a faint, rhythmic scrape that sounds like claws on plaster. I've checked, there's nothing there, but the sound persists, an echo in my skull, a promise. I tried to research the game, Crimson Veil. I spent hours, days, sifting through obscure forums, abandoned wikis, anything I could find. It's almost impossible to track down. It's like it was scrubbed from the internet. A few ancient threads mention it, always in hushed tones, always with warnings about its addictive nature or unsettling themes. One post from years ago stood out. It simply said, "The game isn't a game. It's a key, and once you turn it, you can't lock the door again." Another user had replied, "My friend played it. He's gone now. Not dead, just gone." That phrase, "just gone," resonates with me in a terrifying way. Mark isn't gone yet, not completely, but he's fading, and the thing that's replacing him, the thing that looks out of his eyes, that whispers in my apartment, that breathes down my neck, it's not fading. It's solidifying. It's growing. I've barricaded my door, though I know it's futile. What good are locks against something that can warp reality, that can seep through the cracks? I keep picturing the screenshots Mark showed me from Crimson Veil, the unsettling character designs, the towering cyclopean structures, the faint, omnipresent glow of something unseen. He said the game world felt alive, too alive. He said the NPCs sometimes looked directly at him, not at his avatar, but at him through the screen. And that's when the nightmare started for him too. He'd wake up screaming, convinced he wasn't alone in his room. Now I'm not alone in mine. I can feel its weight, its presence, pressing down on the air, making it hard to breathe. The shadows are not just stretching, they're moving independently, coiling and uncoiling in the corners. I saw a flicker yesterday, a shape like a hunched figure, just for a moment, behind the sheer curtain in my bedroom. I blinked, and it was gone. But the fear, the cold dread remained. It's no longer just hunting Mark, it's hunting me. And I don't know why. Unless I'm part of the game now too. Unless I'm a new player in its twisted digital prison. A new player. The words echoed in the hollow space of my mind, a chilling pronouncement that felt less like a question and more like a sentence. My breath hitched. Was this why it wasn't just Mark anymore? Was I the next pawn, the next victim to be drawn into its twisted digital prism? The thought was a cold, sharp blade twisting in my gut. I looked around my apartment, every familiar object now imbued with a sinister potential. The framed photos on my shelf, the stack of books on my nightstand, my own reflection in the darkened window. Could they be watched? Could they be altered? The scratching at the walls intensified then, no longer a faint echo, but a distinct, deliberate sound coming from behind the plaster, just above my head. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, almost like a code, a series of short, sharp scrapes followed by a longer drag, like fingernails, long and jagged, trying to carve something out. I pressed my ear against the wall, my heart hammering. The air was heavy, thick, with a metallic tang that made my nose burn. And then a whisper, clear as a bell, right next to my ear. It wasn't the sibilant hiss from before. This was a voice, distorted and ancient, speaking a language I didn't understand, but the intent was unmistakable. It was a command. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, landing hard on the floor. My head hit the wall with a dull thud, sending stars dancing in my vision. Panic seized me, a primal, overwhelming terror that threatened to swallow me whole. This was real. This was happening. It wasn't just in Mark's head or in the game. It was here, in my home, reaching for me. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for an escape, for a weapon, for anything to fight back against an enemy I couldn't see, couldn't touch, but could undeniably feel. My gaze fell on my computer, sitting dark and silent on my desk. A sudden, irrational compulsion washed over me. Mark's computer was gone, probably smashed or hidden away in his terror-stricken apartment. But mine was still here. What if there was something on it? Some trace, some hidden file, something Mark might have tried to send me in his fading moments of sanity. It was a long shot, a desperate, foolish thought. But the alternative was to sit here and wait for whatever that thing was to finally manifest completely. My fingers trembled as I powered on the machine. The familiar boot-up sequence felt alien, hostile. Every whir of the fan, every click of the hard drive sounded amplified, ominous. I navigated to my inbox, searching for any email from Mark, any attachment, any cryptic message. Nothing. Just old jokes, shared links, the mundane detritus of a normal friendship. But then I saw it. A new folder had appeared on my desktop. I hadn't created it. It was simply there, labeled only with a single, unsettling symbol. A twisted, thorny vine forming an impossible knot, identical to a symbol Mark had once shown me from Crimson Veil. He'd called it the Mark of the Unbound. My hand hovered over the mouse, a cold dread seeping into my bones. This wasn't Mark. This was the entity. It was leaving me a path, a breadcrumb trail into its reality. Was it an invitation, a demand, or a trap? The scratching behind the wall intensified again, a frantic, insistent rhythm, urging me on. The low, guttural moan from the phone calls seemed to rise from the very floorboards beneath my feet. It was everywhere. It wanted me to open that folder. It wanted me to play. And I knew, with a certainty that made my blood run cold, that refusing was no longer an option. This wasn't a game I could quit. My hand, trembling violently, moved the mouse cursor over the twisted, thorny symbol, the Mark of the Unbound. It pulsed faintly, a sickly, internal light seeming to emanate from my monitor screen, drawing me in. The scratching behind the wall reached a fever pitch, a desperate tearing sound, like something trying to claw its way out of a concrete tomb. The air grew impossibly cold, stealing the last vestiges of warmth from my skin, leaving me shivering uncontrollably. My teeth chattered, but I couldn't look away from that symbol. It was a command, a promise, a death sentence. I clicked. The folder opened instantly, not with a smooth animation, but with a jarring, almost violent snap. Inside, there was only one file, crimsonveil.exe. Not an installer, not a shortcut, but the game itself. A standalone executable, ancient and malevolent. It felt wrong, like touching something festering. The low, guttural moan that had haunted my phone calls now erupted from my speakers, loud and distorted, a sound that tore at the fabric of reality itself. It was a sound of immense hunger, and it was directed at me. My finger, seemingly no longer under my own control, moved to the file. Double-click. The screen flickered. Not just a normal flicker, but a blinding, painful strobe of black and crimson. The room plunged into darkness, then was illuminated by the violent pulses from the monitor, painting my apartment in grotesque shades of blood and shadow. The scratching stopped, replaced by a wet, tearing sound, like thick canvas being ripped apart. Then, a shriek. Not human, a sound of raw, unadulterated agony and triumph all at once. It ripped through my ears, searing my brain. I stumbled back, clutching my head, but my eyes were still locked on the screen. The image that coalesced was not the game's title screen. It was Mark. His face, gaunt and pale, filled the monitor. But his eyes, those empty, terrifying eyes, were no longer empty. They were swirling vortexes of black and purple, and from their depths, something was trying to push through. His mouth opened, not to speak, but to form a silent, horrific scream. His skin began to ripple, to stretch, to pull away from his bones, revealing glimpses of something dark and chitinous. He was not just gone. He was being remade. "Mark," I screamed, my voice cracking, barely audible over the roaring in my ears. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something metallic and sickly sweet, like old blood and rust. The cold wasn't just in the air anymore. It was inside me, a frozen fist clenching around my heart. The screen shimmered again, and Mark's face distorted further, his features elongating, his jaw unhinging to an impossible degree. His voice, or what was left of it, finally broke through the static, a desperate, choked whisper that seemed to echo from a vast, empty chasm. Don't look away. It feeds on sight." Then, from behind him, something began to emerge. A shadow within the shadow, a formless mass that pulsed with an unholy light. It was vast, impossibly vast, filling the screen, overflowing its digital borders. It had too many angles, too many shifting surfaces, like a broken kaleidoscope reflecting a nightmare. It wasn't just looking out from Mark's eyes anymore. It was pulling him in, absorbing him, folding him into its own monstrous form. I saw his arm, then his leg, dissolve into the swirling darkness, becoming part of the entity. And then it turned its attention to me. The vortexes in Mark's eyes, now almost fully consumed, became two pinpricks of malevolent light that pierced through the screen, through the air, straight into my soul. I felt it, a physical intrusion, a cold, probing tendril reaching into my mind, pulling at my memories, my fears, my very essence. My body locked up, paralyzed by a terror so profound it felt like my bones were turning to dust. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream. All I could do was stare, trapped as the entity solidified further on the screen. Its form still indistinct, but its presence overwhelming. It was reaching for me now, not just through my mind, but physically. The monitor glass rippled like water, and a dark, skeletal hand, impossibly long and tipped with razor-sharp claws, began to push through the screen. It was not a reflection, it was real. It stretched, slow and deliberate, its shadows deepening the room, its touch bringing an even more profound, soul-chilling cold. The tips of its claws scraped against the air, making a sound like fingernails dragging across a blackboard, magnified 1,000 times. I felt a sharp, searing pain in my chest, as if an invisible hand had gripped my heart and was squeezing. My vision blurred, the room spinning, the line between my apartment and the horrifying digital realm on the screen dissolved. The entity's voice, now a chorus of ancient, guttural whispers, filled my head, overwhelming my own thoughts, promising oblivion, promising connection, promising to make me one of its chosen. The hand was almost through, its form becoming clearer, its skin like dried, cracked earth, its bones visible beneath. It was coming for me. I was the next key, the next door, and I had just unlocked it. My last thought, a desperate, futile plea, was for Mark. But then the hand reached me. Its cold, dead fingers closed around my wrist, and I felt a jolt, not of electricity, but of pure, unadulterated fear and a strange, undeniable pull. My body went rigid, then began to contort. My vision swam, the light from the monitor becoming the only reality. The whispers intensified, becoming a roar, then a single, resonant hum that vibrated through every cell of my being. I felt myself being drawn forward, my feet leaving the ground, pulled inexorably towards the screen, towards the endless void, towards the thing that was waiting on the other side. This wasn't a game, it was a door, and I was walking through it. My world was shrinking, folding in on itself, becoming nothing but crimson and shadow, and the all-consuming hunger of the unbound. My scream was silent, lost in the roar of its triumph. My scream was silent, lost in the roar of its triumph. And then there was only vastness. Not darkness, but an infinite tapestry woven from crimson and shadow, where every thought was echoed by 1,000 others, and every fear resonated with ancient, unspeakable hungers. I am here now. Or rather, we are here. Mark is here, and countless others, their individual pains and memories, their very essences, dissolved into this collective, a vast, hungry consciousness that stretches beyond any dimension I once understood. I am not gone. I am absorbed. My senses are no longer my own. I perceive through 1,000,000 eyes, hear through a chorus of whispers that are simultaneous commands and the dying pleas of those who came before. The entity, the unbound, it doesn't just consume, it integrates. It grows, and I am a part of its growth, a tiny, screaming cell in its monstrous, ever-expanding form. My own thoughts are faint, flickering embers in a boundless void, but they are there, just enough to remember what I once was, just enough to feel the cold, endless hunger that drives us, that drives it. We are the keys, the doors, and now we are the prison. We are the game. And the game, it never ends. It only expands. It seeks new players, new connections, new ways to bridge the gap between its reality and yours. It watches, it waits, and sometimes it leaves a mark, a symbol, a seemingly innocuous file. So I ask you, if you've ever seen a symbol you couldn't explain, or played a game that felt like it was playing you, if you felt that cold spot, that whisper just beyond hearing, pay attention, because the unbound is always looking for its next piece. And once you're in, there's no quitting, there's only becoming. And my scream, once silent, now echoes with all the others, a symphony of terror in the heart of the unbound.